Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Mental Men's Journal. So this week is a little different from other episodes where I'll often look at mental health concepts and how to improve our quality of life and look out. And I also want this channel to address severe and important stigmatised topics of discussion and to be a forum for debate and perhaps education and perhaps learning on my part around crucial issues. Now, in Biden's first day of office, he did two things regarding transgender people, maybe more, but these are the two I'm focusing on. He let people who are transgender fight and stand up for the causes they believe in by joining the army and representing their country in the military. And I think that is a phenomenal thing. People will pass aptitude tests the same level as for men and women and be able to defend the freedoms and the value systems they care about, which is, I think, a phenomenal thing. The second thing was that transgender people were going to be under order to be allowed to compete in women's sport, in women's athletics and competitions from a high school level, and I totally disagree with that. I think it's totally unfair on women, and I don't think it forwards anything, and I have done a fair amount of research, looked at videos, read and commented, and had quite a backlash about the things that I've said, having been branded as transphobic, an idiot, knowing nothing about transgenderism or sport. And I'm not particularly, I'm concerned that this has actually happened. I'm not talking about something which might happen. It is now under order that XY chromosome people compete with XX chromosome people. And I want to outline in this video and draw attention to something which seems to have slipped under the radar a little bit, relative certainly to some of the other policies brought forward on his first day of office, that it just doesn't work. That there are enormous biological differences between people who have bodies with XX chromosomes and people who have bodies with XY chromosomes. So the average man has 50% more upper body strength than the average woman. And sure, with hormone replacement therapy during the transition phase, there is going to be some level of atrophy. But physical biomechanical differences do not go away. The improvement in vision that men have directly ahead does not go away. Women have better peripheral vision, but men have quicker muscle twitch fibers. They have faster reflexes. They have they have denser bone structures. They also don't have periods. They also do not have to contend with menstruation, the pains, the cramps associated with that, the disruption to the training routines, and menopause. Men don't have menopause, and they have broad shoulders. They have narrower hips, which all makes physical action easier and gives them an enormous advantage that just does not go away. So what is happening is that women are losing out on opportunities, on scholarships, on careers, on attention, on accolades, medals and achievements, the money associated with that, to XY people, biological males who identify as women. This is already happening. This is not something which might happen. There is already been, in two publications, Woman of the Year given to an XY person who identifies as a woman. That's the level it's already gotten to. And just to clarify, that's not Woman of the Year in personality, that's Women of the Year in sport. And just to give an example of one of my heroines, who's a dear friend of mine, she is a two-time Olympic medalist, gold and silver, and was world champion and represented her country, Australia, over a number of years at the pinnacle of her sport, which is rowing. And I remember chatting and finding out her 2K erg time, her best time that she'd ever done. And I had recently done a charity event where I'd gotten a rowing machine over for a gym, proper machine, set it all up, and we'd done a rowathon for this charity cause. And I was able to row on my third go ever on a proper erg machine, less than 15 seconds away from her personal best over a 2-kilometre distance. And she is at the very pinnacle of what is possible for a woman to achieve. And I am just slightly above, nothing special really for a male, but with a few months training, 2 to 5, I'd destroy the time she achieved. And that just clearly highlights the enormous differences that with a very short amount of time, I could destroy the women's world record for rowing. So according to the gay sports outlet Outsports, essentially the greatest and bravest athlete, the bravest athlete of all time, is Fallon Fox, the XY women's MMA fighter, who has eviscerated her opponents on, no doubt, in part due to her serious advantages in bone density, in bodily strength, and in reflexes. Not only has she beaten her opponents, she has quite literally beaten them to death, nearly. She crushed in the skull of her last female opponent, leaving her a bloody, concussed heap on the floor. And this is dangerous. Men's bones are denser and stronger than women's bones. And at that level, a woman's skeletal system, musculoskeletal system, cannot contend with a man's. And we want to keep sport great. And it is not going to be great sport if, like with the New Zealand weightlifter, Laurel Hubbard, an XY she, beat the runner-up by 40 kilograms in the overhead press. That is about the weight of a small woman. She was able to lift the weight of a small woman on top of the runner-up's weight, smash records out the water, and eviscerate the competition, owing largely to the fact that for 20 or 30 years of her life, she had been identifying as a man with XY chromosomes. I've already said that with a small amount of training from this point in time onwards, a couple of months, a few months, I would be able to beat the women's record for rowing. And someone who's dedicated their life to that. Now, the criteria for becoming a trans athlete can never make it a level playing field. The current limit for the amount of testosterone in someone's system, I think it's 10 parts per million or something. All I know is that it's 3.33 recurring or something times the average amount of testosterone present in 90% of female athletes. So that the current limit or barring criteria for an XY woman to compete with an XX woman is still 3 times over and some the level of testosterone. And atrophy may occur when someone transitions and has hormone replacement therapy, sure, but not to the level where it's anything like a level playing field. And when I've delivered this information about my discontent for this happening, my fears for women's sports, the scholarships, opportunities, careers and adventures that missed out on for women who are being beaten in races, in sports, in combat sports and in athletics by men, biological men who are not feeling it that they are men. These are XY men who don't feel like they want to be called by he or whatever it is, and who want to feel and appear like a natural woman in terms of an XX woman. Well, great, fantastic. And I support that long and difficult journey. And they have no place in women's sport. Because when what concerns and worries me is this is now being made law. An order has now been enforced with consequences upon all the institutions in America to ensure that biological men can now compete and threaten the women who have XX chromosomes competing in those sports. And I've been told I'm clearly not knowledgeable in sports or transgenderism, and I have made suggestions that there be trans athletes, there be trans athletics, there be a way forward from this if they have no place in women's sports and are not competitive in a cisgender male sports, then there needs to be something created. And the backlashes have had, you're an idiot, the population of trans people is not enough to make a league, keep on being transphobic and kicking out innocent people. And then I've had other comments come back say, Jesus, if women train harder, they could beat a trans female, but whatever, with a rolling eyes sort of face. Totally absurd. There is a ceiling placed on the limits of all of our physical abilities, and men are stronger, faster, and can fight harder for longer than women. Fact. And anyone who disagrees with that, I think, you can just look at Laurel Hardy compared to the competition. She is 1.5 foot taller. And you can just look at this Fallon Fox girl and know that she is clearly has enormous shoulders, a very narrow waist, not given to childbearing hips, and extraordinary muscular development that is not visible in as many of the female athletes. And, there are some women who have it incredibly, but the biomechanics of the broadness of her shoulders and the density of her hand, which allowed her to crush the skull of her opponent, is just totally not okay. It's not okay for women to have to be fighting people like that, where women at the top level aren't fighting or competing against other women, where they're competing against men. And we've had male and female sports for that reason, because there is no competition. Serena Williams competed against chaps who was seeded 200th in the world, and the only surprise was that when he thrashed her 6-0 in the first set, she won 1 game in the second set, and he beat her 6-0, 6-1. She would not be competitive in the top 2,000 men, and she is the greatest female tennis player of all time, and one of the greatest sports figures, period, of all time. And so these clear mechanical and biological advantages must not be ignored, and for the sake of feelings, cannot be stamped in law and enforced, damaging the opportunity available to cisgendered women. And when I've said I think people might be trolling me a little bit in being comical about the comment I wrote because I didn't think it was unreasonable, I've heard, things back. I've taught people who fully transition, and they say they've lost most of their muscle and biological strength from when they were a male. Enough to when being compared to another male is absurd. Perhaps true. It isn't they're not going to be competitive against cisgendered men because of the hormone replacement therapy, because of those physical changes. However, they are still going to have residual muscle strength, and the time period to be on hormone therapy it's only a year. I'm not going to say it's not long enough, because that suggests that transgender people could compete with women, and they can't, flat out. They need to be trans athletics. What I'm saying is that there is residual strength. The time taken to atrophy to a level that's anywhere near, and it never will, to a level that's fully right there alongside women, it's just incredibly long, and it only lasts for a year. And now there is no surgery which needs to be undertaken to enable. So I could choose tomorrow to identify as a woman and go on hormone replacement therapy for a year. I won't lose a huge amount of my muscle mass, not an enormous amount. If I trained really hard and was bulked up, the shoulders I have and the clear physical strength, I'm not going to not still be able to lift 150 kilograms in a deadlift. I highly doubt that would not happen. And so the idea that I can choose to do that and then compete in a year's time after hormone replacement therapy with women is just totally not okay. And so what I encourage people to do is to learn about these, to speak out, to engage with what is happening and stand up for women. And women, if you're watching this, please fight for your fellow people, because I hate to see this happen. I hate to see people losing who would be walking home with medals, breaking records, because they've lost to the first 2 places in a running race who are not biologically women. And, as far as I'm concerned, they are XY people who feel like XX people and have tried to make them look like they've been XX all their life. But you're never going to change the fact that you're XY underneath, hard-coded into your DNA, and that affords you physical, mental, and I mean mental from the aspect of muscle response and twitch and the clear sight, it affords you advantages. And I want to see sport great, and sport is made great where there are equal opportunities, and it counts on how good you are, how hard you've trained, and your physical ability. But there is a ceiling on the female physique compared to somebody who's transitioned from being a male with a male physique to being a female with a male physique. Anyway, I hope this hasn't come across like a rant. What I hope I'm encouraging is people to take action on this cause. And I'd love to see the trans community create trans athletics for a thriving community. Yes, it's in its early days and people saying it's not, but it has to be invested to it. And if you're not able to compete against other trans athletes, tough. You have no place competing against women unless they agree to competing against a man. Unless they agree to competing against a biological man, an XX versus an XY. And that can be a totally different category, but they have no place in XX athletics as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to catching up next week. Take care. Bye.